In 1906, 3 farms along the Brazos River lost their livestock in ways that made grown men refuse to work their fields after sunset. The killings started in late September, when the cotton stood tall and white, ready for harvest. By the time we understood what hunted in those fields, 2 families had abandoned their land, and the county sheriff had stopped answering calls about strange tracks in the dirt. So before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. I first learned about the deaths from my neighbor, Samuel Tarver, when he rode to my property on a Tuesday morning with his rifle across his saddle and his face the color of old ash. He said his prize bull had been killed in the night, not butchered for meat, not taken by wolves, but torn apart and left scattered across half an acre. He drew the pattern in the dirt with a stick, pieces here, pieces there, arranged almost deliberate. Then he showed me a tuft of coarse black hair he'd pulled from the fence wire. It was longer than any dog's, thicker than any bear's, and it smelled wrong, like sulfur and spoiled meat and something else that made my stomach turn without knowing why. I was 34 then, working 200 acres of cotton and corn along the river bottom with my wife Mary and our 2 boys. We'd built our farm up from nothing over 12 years, through drought and flood and falling prices. I thought I'd seen everything the land could throw at us. The Tarvers farmed the property to our north, the Wheelers to our south, and old Henrik Baum kept his place across the road, though he mostly ran cattle since his sons died of fever in '03. We all knew each other's business, helped with harvests, shared equipment when times were lean. So when Sam told his story, I believed him, even the parts that sounded like they came from a bottle. Sam was stone sober, and his hands shook as he spoke. He said the bull had been inside a pen with 8-foot posts and wire between them. No gaps, no breaks. But something had gotten in and done its work without waking the dogs or the household. The tracks around the carcass were wrong, too long, with what looked like claw marks at the ends, but also a heel print like a man's. They led from the pen to the cotton field and disappeared where the plants grew thick. I rode back with Sam to see for myself. The smell hit us 50 yards from the pen, copper and rot, and that same wrongness from the hair. The bull, or what remained of it, lay in pieces, as Sam had described. But what stopped my breath was the ground around it. The dirt was pressed down in a wide circle, packed hard like something heavy had walked around the carcass many times. The tracks overlapped and crossed, but a few clear ones showed at the edge. They were hand length and deep, with 5-digit marks spread wide. Between the toes, the soil was torn, like something had webbed feet or long claws that dragged. Sam's dogs wouldn't go near the pen. They whined and pulled against their chains when we tried to bring them close. His horse, a steady mare that had never spooked at anything, refused to pass the gate. We had to tie her to a post 30 feet away, and even then she stamped and rolled her eyes. That night, I loaded both my shotguns and set them by the door. I told Mary it was for coyotes, but she knew better. She'd seen my face when I came home. Our boys, James and little Robert, were told to sleep in our room and not to go outside after dark for any reason. The dogs we brought inside, though they'd never been house dogs before. They paced by the windows all night, growling low at things we couldn't see. The next killing happened at the Wheeler place 3 nights later. Not cattle this time, horses. 3 of them, including a yearling colt that Tom Wheeler had planned to sell at auction. Tom found them at dawn, their bodies opened from throat to belly, organs pulled out, and arranged in a rough line pointing toward the river. The tracks were clearer this time. Tom had wetted down the corral dirt the evening before to keep dust low, and the prints pressed deep and perfect into the mud. 5 toes, webbing between them, claws that dug furrows, and a stride longer than any man could make running. Tom Wheeler was educated, had been to college in Austin before his father died, and called him home to farm. He took measurements, made sketches, even mixed plaster to take casts of the best prints. He said they reminded him of something he'd seen in a book once. Drawings of reptile feet, but sized wrong, built wrong, like someone had tried to make a lizard walk upright and gotten the proportions twisted. The casts he made were clean and detailed. Later, after everything ended, those casts disappeared from his house. His wife said she burned them, said keeping them felt like inviting the thing back. Word spread through the county faster than fever. The sheriff, a thick man named Carson, who'd fought Apaches in his youth, came out to investigate. He brought 2 deputies and a tracking dog that had once followed a killer 40 miles to arrest. The dog took one smell of the tracks, tucked its tail, and ran back to the wagon. It took both deputies to drag it out again, and when they did, it bit one of them bad enough to need stitches and wouldn't stop howling until they let it hide under a blanket. Sheriff Carson looked at the tracks, at the carcasses, at the hare Sam had saved. He walked the property lines, checked the fields, even waded into the river shallows looking for sign. When he came back, his face was closed and hard. He said it was probably a rabid bear, maybe escaped from some traveling show, maybe sick enough to act strange. Nobody believed him. He didn't believe himself. We could see it in the way he wouldn't meet our eyes. But he wrote "bear attack" in his report and told us to keep our guns loaded and our families inside after dark. The killings stopped for a week. We started to hope whatever it was had moved on, gone back to wherever such things come from. The cotton needed picking, the corn needed cutting, and we couldn't afford to lose the harvest to fear. So we worked our fields in groups, always armed, always watching, finishing before the sun touched the horizon. Even then, the work felt wrong. The fields were too quiet. No birds sang in the rows. No rabbits ran from the harvest noise. The cotton seemed to muffle sound, making every word feel small and far away. Henrik Baum was the first to see it clearly. He'd always been stubborn, said he was too old to be scared of stories. So he stayed out past sunset one evening, trying to fix a broken gate on his east pasture. He came to my house that night, pounding on the door with both fists, his eyes wide and white as eggs. Mary made him coffee while he sat at our table, trying to make words come straight. He'd been working the gate when his cattle started bellowing, all of them at once, the way they do when they smell fire. He looked up to see them running, the whole herd moving like water away from the far fence line. Then he saw why. Something tall stood at the edge of his property where the cotton field met the pasture. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but wrong-jointed, bent in places that shouldn't bend. Its head was too large, too long, ending in a snout full of teeth that caught the last light. The body was covered in coarse hair, or maybe scales. He couldn't tell in the dimness, and its arms hung too low, almost to its knees, ending in hands that spread wide with webbing between the fingers. It watched the cattle run, head tilted like it was thinking. Then it turned toward Henrik. He said its eyes reflected light, like a coyote's, but bigger, set forward in its skull. It took one step toward him, then another, each stride covering more ground than seemed possible. Henrik ran. He left his tools, his horse, everything, and ran the half-mile to my farm without stopping. His heart was still racing when he told the story. His hands shook so hard he couldn't hold the coffee cup steady. I wanted to call him sun-touched, wanted to find some explanation that fit the world I knew. But I'd seen the tracks, smelled that wrongness in the air, watched my dogs cower from empty fields. And Henrik Baum had never lied in the 20 years I'd known him, never exaggerated, never backed down from anything until that night. We gathered the next morning, me, Sam, Tom Wheeler, Henrik, and 2 other farmers from farther up the river who'd lost chickens and goats in strange ways. We decided to hunt it. 6 grown men with rifles and shotguns, dogs, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. We thought we were ready. We thought it was just an animal. Strange, maybe, but still something that could bleed and die like anything else. We started at first light, spreading out in a line through the cotton fields, keeping sight of each other, checking every depression and shadow. The dogs stayed close to our heels, bellies low, making small whimpering sounds. The morning was clear and still, already warm, but I felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The cotton seemed to close around us, muffling our footsteps, making it hard to judge distance. Tom Wheeler saw the den first, though den isn't the right word. It was a hollow torn into the earth, beneath a massive cottonwood tree near the river, the entrance wider than a wagon wheel and sloping down into darkness. The smell that came from it made us all step back, thick and animal, but also chemical, like the rendering plant in town, but worse. Around the entrance, the ground was worn smooth and hard-packed. Bones lay scattered in the grass, some old and white, others still pink with remnants. Cow bones, horse bones, and some that looked too delicate to come from livestock. We stood there staring at that hole, nobody wanting to be the one who suggested going inside. The dogs wouldn't go near it. One of Tom's hounds actually sat down and refused to move, just howled and howled until Tom tied it to a tree 50 yards back. We could hear something down in that darkness, not movement exactly, but a sound like breathing, deep and slow and wet. Sam threw a rock into the hole. It clattered down, the sound echoing strangely, then silence. We waited. Nothing came out, but the breathing sound stopped. The quiet that followed was worse than any noise would have been. It was the quiet of something listening, something waiting, something deciding. Henrik suggested fire. Pour kerosene down the hole and light it. Smoke out whatever was inside. Tom wanted to collapse the entrance, seal it with rocks and dirt. I said we should get dynamite from the railroad crew working near town. We argued in whispers, afraid to raise our voices, while the morning sun climbed higher and the shadows shortened. That's when we heard it moving. Not from the den, from the cotton field behind us. A rustling that was too rhythmic to be wind, too heavy to be any normal animal. We turned as one, rifles raised, and saw the cotton stalks bending in a line, something large pushing through them, circling our position. The dogs went crazy, barking and snarling, but backing away, pressing against our legs. "There," Tom whispered, pointing to a gap in the rows. I saw it for just a moment, a shape darker than shadow, taller than any man, moving with a strange hitching gait that covered ground faster than a run. Its head turned toward us, and I glimpsed a face that was almost human in structure, but stretched wrong, pulled forward into a snout, with eyes that sat too high and teeth that showed even with its mouth closed. Then it was gone, vanished into the cotton like smoke. We stood there, 6 armed men, and not one of us fired. We couldn't. It moved too fast, too strange, and some part of our minds refused to accept it as real enough to shoot at. Sam later said it was like trying to aim at a nightmare. Your hands just wouldn't work right. The rustling came again from our left, then our right, then behind us. It was circling, playing with us maybe, or studying us. The dogs broke. Tom's hound tore its rope and ran. The others followed, howling as they went. That broke our nerve, too. We backed away from the den, keeping our guns up, walking fast but trying not to run. Running felt like it would trigger something, like it would make us prey instead of hunters. We made it to the edge of the field before it showed itself fully. It stepped out of the cotton not 20 yards from us, standing in the clear morning light where we could see every detail. Henrik had been right about the size, 7 feet tall at least, maybe 8. The body was covered in dark hair that looked coarse as wire, but underneath, where the hair was thinner, the skin had a scaled texture like a snake's belly. Its legs bent backward at the knee like a bird's, but thick with muscle. The arms were too long, jointed wrong, ending in hands that spread wide enough to wrap around a man's chest. Between the fingers, I could see the webbing, translucent in the sunlight. But the face was the worst part. It was almost human in the way that makes mockery of human features. The eyes were intelligent, aware, looking at each of us in turn like it was memorizing our faces. The mouth opened slightly, showing rows of teeth that didn't match, some flat like ours, others sharp as fishing hooks. It made a sound then, low in its throat, that wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite voice. It sounded like words in a language that predated words. Tom Wheeler raised his rifle first. His shot was true. I saw the impact, saw the thing jerk back. But it didn't fall. Dark blood, almost black, ran from its shoulder, but it just looked at the wound, then back at Tom. Its expression didn't change, but something in its posture did. It dropped to all fours, and in that position it looked even less like anything that belonged in our world. It moved toward us, not charging, but advancing steady, deliberate. We all fired then, 6 guns at close range. I know we hit it. I saw the impacts, saw it stumble once, but it kept coming. We backed up faster, reloading as we went. Sam tripped over a cotton row and went down. The thing's head snapped toward him, focused. It could have reached him in 2 strides, could have torn him apart before we could react. But it didn't. It stopped, tilted its head, and made that sound again. This time, it did sound like words. Old words in a tongue I didn't know, but somehow understood the meaning. Not yet. Then it turned and walked back into the cotton. Not ran, walked, like we weren't worth the effort of running from. We grabbed Sam and ran ourselves. Dignity be damned. We ran until we reached our horses, and then we rode hard for town. Sheriff Carson listened to our story, with his face getting harder and harder. When we finished, he said he was done. Said this was beyond his jurisdiction, maybe beyond anyone's. He wired Austin for help, but the response was what we expected. Local matter. Handle it locally. The sheriff stopped taking calls about livestock deaths after that. Said if we saw it again, we should deal with it ourselves, or leave it be. The attacks continued, but changed. Instead of killing livestock, it started taking them. Cattle, horses, pigs. They would vanish in the night. No blood, no remains, just gone. The tracks would lead to the river and disappear. Some farmers found drag marks, like it was pulling the animals somewhere. Others found nothing, like the beasts had simply stopped existing. People started leaving. The Wheelers went first, packed up, and moved to relatives in Houston. They said it was for Tom's health, but we knew better. 2 more families followed within a week. Those of us who remained stopped working alone, stopped going out after dark for any reason. We built higher fences, kept fires burning all night, painted crosses on our doors, though nobody really thought that she would help. Mary wanted us to leave, too. She packed our things twice, unpacked them twice. We had nowhere to go and no money to start over. The farm was all we had. But more than that, something in me refused to be driven off by something that shouldn't exist. Pride, maybe, or stupidity, or the simple fact that accepting it as real enough to run from meant accepting that the world wasn't what I thought it was. The end came in October, 3 weeks before harvest would have been done. A norther blew in, bringing early cold and dense fog that rolled off the river like a living thing. The fog was so thick you couldn't see past your hand. It muffled sound, turned everything gray and close. Perfect cover for something that didn't want to be seen. I woke that night to the dogs barking, then to them stopping all at once. The silence that followed was complete. No insects, no wind, nothing. I grabbed my shotgun and went to the window. The fog pressed against the glass like it was trying to get in. I couldn't see the barn, couldn't see the fence, couldn't see anything but gray. Then something scraped against the outside wall, long and slow, like claws being dragged across wood. It circled the house, testing each wall, each window. I followed the sound, gun raised, Mary behind me with the boys huddled against her. The scraping stopped at the front door. The handle turned. We'd locked it, barred it, but the handle turned anyway, metal groaning. The door held, but through the gap at the bottom, fog crept in, and with it came that smell, sulfur and rot and wrongness. The boys started crying. Mary prayed under her breath. I aimed at the door and waited. The handle stopped turning. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then it spoke. The voice came from just outside, low and wet and almost human. It said my name. Not rough, not threatening, but clear and careful, like it had been practicing. John Bennett, it said. John Bennett, farmer. John. Bennett, father. John Bennett, pray. I almost answered. Something in its tone made me want to respond, to acknowledge it. Mary grabbed my arm, her nails digging in, and that broke whatever spell it was weaving. I stayed silent. It repeated my name 3 more times, each time slightly different, like it was tasting the sounds. Then it laughed, or made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could rot. The scraping resumed, this time on the roof. Heavy steps crossed above us, boards creaking under the weight. Dust fell from the ceiling. It was looking for a way in, testing every point of entry. The chimney, I thought suddenly. But when I looked, Mary had already stuffed it with quilts, thinking the same thing. All night it circled, scraped, tested. All night we stood ready, afraid to sleep, afraid to look away from doors and windows. As dawn approached and the fog began to thin, it made one more sound, a long, low call that echoed across the fields. An answer came from the direction of the river, then another from the north, then more, at least a dozen voices joining in a chorus that made my bones ache. When the sun finally burned through the fog, we saw what it had left. Every animal we owned, horses, cattle, chickens, pigs, stood in a perfect circle around our house, all dead, all facing inward, with their eyes open. No wounds, no blood, just dead. In the dirt between them, a message was scratched in letters 3 feet tall. Leave. We left. That morning, we loaded what we could carry and left everything else behind. As we drove away, I looked back once. Something tall stood in our doorway, watching. It raised one wrong-jointed arm in what might have been a wave, or might have been a promise. We went to Fort Worth, where Mary had cousins. Found work in the stockyards, saved enough to start again. This time in New Mexico, where the land was different and the nights were quiet. We never talked about what happened, not to others, not to each other. The boys forgot, or seemed to. Mary remembered, but kept it buried. And I remembered everything. Years later, I read in a newspaper that the abandoned farms along that stretch of the Brazos had been bought up by a development company. They were going to build a new town there, modern houses with electric lights and paved roads. The article mentioned that survey crews had found an unusual number of caves and dens along the river, probably left by flooding. They planned to fill them all with concrete before building. I wrote them a letter, warning them not to build there, telling them just enough to sound concerning without sounding insane. They never replied. The town was built. It thrived for 3 years. Then came the night in 1911 when every soul in that town, 43 people, vanished. No bodies, no blood, no signs of violence. Just an empty town with doors standing open and meals half eaten on tables. The state investigators found tracks in the dirt, hundreds of them, circling every house. They found the word "ours" carved into the side of the new church. They found the concrete-filled dens had been torn open from below, the concrete shattered like paper. But they didn't find the people. The official report blamed a gas leak that caused mass hysteria and exodus. The town was abandoned again, and this time it stayed that way. I'm an old man now, telling this to you because I won't be around much longer, and someone should know. Someone should remember that there are things in the hidden places of Texas that don't follow the rules. We made up to feel safe. They were here before us. They'll be here after us. And sometimes, when we push too far into their territory, they push back. The land along that part of the Brazos is still empty today. The county won't sell it. The state won't develop it. Locals won't hunt there. They say it's protected wetland now, important for wildlife preservation. But I know the real reason. Some doors, once opened, can't be fully closed. Some things once awakened only pretend to go back to sleep. On certain foggy nights, when the air turns thick and sound travels wrong, I think about that voice saying my name. I wonder if it remembers me. I wonder if it's still there, walking those fields in the dark, waiting for someone foolish enough to build there again. And sometimes, in the smallest hours of the night, I swear I can hear it calling across all these years and all these miles. John Bennett, John Bennett, John Bennett. I always make sure my doors are locked when I hear that. Even here, even now, even though I know locks never really stopped it. They just showed it we understood the rules. We stay in our places. It stays in its place. And we pretend the boundary is stronger than it really is. Because pretending is all that keeps us safe. The Brazos still flows through that land, and the cotton still grows wild in the abandoned fields. But if you're smart, you'll never go there looking for what we found. Some things are better left as stories. Some territories are better left unclaimed. And some devils, Texas or otherwise, are better left undisturbed in whatever hell they've made for themselves along that dark stretch of river.